law is one of the major factors in the organization of the economy and in the capacity of governments to influence what happens in the economy. So both in terms of the organization of industries, companies, through private law, plus the capacity of governments through public law, influences the capacity of a country to articulate a goal and then reach it. So that's, and then you just have to go into every single area of the law and say, what about this, what about that? And again, there are no uniform rules. Each country has to develop for itself and learn for itself what works and what doesn't work. Again, they can learn a little from studying each other, but there's no secret book that you can pull out and say, this is what you need to do.
It's a fundamental question if we think about promoting development in a democratic context, because at the same time you want to promote progress, you also want to keep and guarantee rights and then promote the inclusion of new actors in the economy and the political context. But definitely it's not a trivial relationship. In many cases, law ends up being an obstacle for development, such as we see now in Brazil in cases of excessive bureaucracies for the procurement of projects in the implementation of infrastructure. But at the same time, law is definitely the tool that allows for the protection of rights and minorities and respect for their identities in the process of development.
There are many ways by which you can tackle this question. Of course, one way, a very traditional one, is to, first of all, try to understand how law could be a barrier, an obstacle for economic development. But this is just one aspect of the question. The other aspect is how can legal institutions forge or create incentives for economic development, such as, for example, how regulatory agencies can formulate more flexible, more dynamic way to deal with the regulation of some specific markets. Another way, which I think is very important too, is how can new patterns of contractual relationships can be established. For example, more relational contractings, more cooperative joint ventures, which I think are also play a very important and strategic role in terms of economic and social development nowadays.
Law not only regulates economic processes, it also creates the institutions and the actors who participate in them. So law, many of the basic legal forms, credit, rent, property, are legal forms. And from that point of view, we can easily understand that legal arrangements made differently will lead to economies that run differently. Actors that have different incentives, different powers, and different distribution of capacities to injure one another, to benefit from one another's work and productivity and so forth. So law is integral to the background structure that makes not only development, but all economic activity possible. Arranging law differently means you could have economies that work differently.
I think the tools we actually need now to deal with development issues, especially with wealth distribution issues, are I don't know if mainly, but are strongly legal. You need law to occupy the space that it hasn't been occupying for decades, that has been occupied by economists that are not worried about wealth transfer issues, and law is the one to worry about that. So I think law has a central role in law and development.
That's a big question and an old question. It's my view is that the relationships are many and multifaceted, but that basically legal development and economic political development work. It's in a reciprocal relationship. Legal development is sometimes necessary for economic development, but economic development in turn demands additional legal development so that there's a reciprocal, ongoing, complex relationship between the two.
The answer has to do with politics ultimately, and with the evolution of the way in which the government interferes with society in the modern world. Roughly speaking, in Western democracies, policy is implemented through law. A justifiable concern with predictability has meant that political intervention is nowadays set in terms of law. The fact that politics plays out through legal means that policies carry the risk of litigation. Given that, lawyers are moved immediately and unavoidably to the forefront of policy. The implication is that the legal system ends up refracting politics. Politics set out the general direction of policy. However, because policy is implemented through law, the final result might be different from what the original political impulse has established. To sum up, legal knowledge matters for development in the sense that it constrains policy, and lawyers can be thought in many ways as experts in this refraction.